The strange encounter. The wind howled through the dense forest, rattling the wooden shutters of Ethan's cabin. He sat by the fireplace, tinkering with an old radio, trying to block out the sound of the storm outside. Ethan lived alone, far from the city, preferring the company of machines over people. His life was simple, predictable. Until tonight. A loud crash outside startled him. It wasn't thunder. It sounded closer, heavier, like something had fallen near his cabin. Frowning, Ethan grabbed his flashlight and cautiously opened the door. The icy wind hit him immediately, making him shiver. He scanned the darkness, the beam of light cutting through the rain. Then he saw her. A woman lay on the muddy ground, half hidden by the bushes. She was barely conscious, her clothes torn, and blood dripped from a deep gash on her arm. Ethan hesitated. She didn't look like anyone from the nearby towns. Her silvery hair and strange metallic scars on her arms stood out even in the dim light. "Hey, are you okay?" Ethan called out, stepping closer. The woman stirred, her glowing silver eyes flickering open. She tried to speak, but her voice was barely a whisper. "Help. Me?" Against his better judgment, Ethan knelt beside her. She was freezing, her skin colder than ice. He couldn't leave her out here in the storm. Wrapping his arms around her, he carried her back to the cabin, her weight lighter than he expected. Inside, Ethan placed her on the old couch near the fire. He grabbed a first aid kit and started cleaning her wound. She flinched at his touch, her glowing eyes watching him warily. "You're lucky I found you," Ethan muttered, trying to focus on the task. "What were you doing out there in this weather?" She didn't answer. Instead, she glanced toward the window, her expression tense. It was as if she was expecting someone, or something, to follow her. Ethan noticed her unease and paused. "Who are you? Why were you out there?" He asked again, his tone firmer this time. "My name is Lyra," she said finally, her voice soft but steady. I can't explain right now. Please, just don't let them find me." "Who's them?" Ethan demanded, but she shook her head, refusing to say more. Ethan sighed. He wasn't the type to get involved in other people's problems, but there was something about her. Her fear felt genuine. He decided not to press her, at least not yet. Instead, he focused on bandaging her wound. As he worked, he couldn't help but notice the strange, metallic sheen of her scars. They didn't look natural, almost as if her skin had been fused with some kind of metal. The storm outside grew louder, and Ethan glanced at the window. The wind was strong, but there was something else, an eerie silence between the gusts. No animals, no distant thunder, just silence. Then he heard it, a faint clicking sound, almost mechanical, coming from the forest. Ethan froze, his hand tightening around the bandage. Lyra's eyes widened, and she sat up suddenly, her body tense. "They're here," she whispered. "Who's here?" Ethan asked, but she didn't answer. She pushed herself off the couch, despite her injury, and moved toward the window. Her movements were graceful, almost unnatural, like a predator stalking its prey. Ethan followed her gaze but saw nothing. "You're not making any sense," he said, frustration creeping into his voice. "Who's after you?" "Stay quiet," she hissed, her glowing eyes narrowing. The clicking grew louder, closer. Ethan's heart raced. He grabbed an old hunting rifle from the corner of the room, though he wasn't sure what good it would do. He wasn't even sure what they were dealing with. Suddenly, something moved in the shadows outside. Ethan's flashlight flickered as he tried to get a better look. He caught a glimpse of red eyes glowing in the dark, moving unnaturally fast between the trees. His breath caught in his throat. "What the hell is that?" he whispered. Lyra didn't answer. Instead, she turned to him, her expression grim. "If they find me, they'll kill us both," she said. "You have to trust me. Do exactly as I say." Ethan hesitated. He didn't trust her. How could he? She had appeared out of nowhere, injured and terrified, with glowing eyes and scars that defied explanation. but the fear in her voice was real, and the sound of those clicks outside was enough to convince him. "Fine," he said. "What do we do?" Lyra grabbed a small device from her pocket. It looked like a smooth metallic disc with strange markings. She pressed a button, and it emitted a faint hum. "This will mask our heat signatures, but only for a short time. Stay close to me." Ethan didn't argue. The clicking was right outside now, and he could see the faint outlines of humanoid figures moving in the rain. They were unlike anything he had ever seen, their movements jerky and inhuman. The red eyes scanned the cabin, and Ethan held his breath, gripping the rifle tightly. For what felt like an eternity, the creatures circled the cabin. Then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, they'd vanished into the woods, the clicking fading into the distance. Ethan exhaled, his hands trembling. "What were those things?" he asked, turning to Lyra. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Hunters," she said quietly, "and they won't stop until they find me." Ethan stared at her, realizing his quiet life had just become far more complicated. The pursuers. The night was unnaturally quiet, the kind of silence that made Ethan's skin crawl. He sat across from Lyra, watching her as she stared into the dying embers of the fire. She hadn't said much since the strange creatures had circled the cabin and vanished. The metallic clicking noise still echoed in his mind, haunting and alien. Ethan broke the silence. "Hunters, you called them. What are they? And why are they after you?" Lyra glanced at him, her glowing silver eyes unreadable. For a moment, it seemed like she was weighing her options. Finally, she spoke, her voice low. "They're not entirely alive. Not like you and me. They're biomechanical assassins, designed to track and eliminate targets. Once they've locked onto someone, they'd never stop." Ethan frowned. "Biomechanical? What does that even mean? Are you saying they're some kind of robot?" "Not just robots. They're alive in a way. Flesh and machine, fused together. And they're hunting me because I broke their rules," Lyra said, her tone sharper now. "I shouldn't have come here. I've put you in danger." Ethan leaned back, the rifle still resting on his lap. He wasn't sure what to believe. Everything about her, the glowing eyes, the strange scars, the advanced technology she carried, was a puzzle he couldn't solve. But one thing was clear: those creatures weren't from Earth. "I didn't ask for this," Ethan muttered, his voice tinged with frustration. "I didn't ask for you to show up and bring whatever this is into my life." Lyra's gaze softened, but only slightly. "You didn't ask for it, but you helped me anyway. That means something. And if you hadn't, those hunters would have already torn me apart." The wind outside picked up again, rattling the windows. Ethan's eyes flicked to the door, half expecting the red-eyed creatures to come crashing through. Instead, he heard a new sound, a faint hum, low and rhythmic, vibrating through the walls. Lyra stood abruptly, her body tense. "They're scanning the area," she said. "It means they're close." "What does that mean for us?" Ethan asked, his grip tightening on the rifle. "It means we don't have much time," she replied. Lyra moved toward the window and peeked out cautiously. "They'll be back. And this time, they won't just circle the cabin." Ethan's mind raced. He was just a mechanic, a recluse who had retreated from the world to avoid dealing with people. Now he was caught in something far bigger than himself. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice quieter now. Lyra turned to him, her expression firm. "We move. They can track my energy signature if I stay in one place too long. But I know a way to throw them off." "Move? Into the woods? At night? Are you insane?" Ethan snapped. "They'll destroy this place anyway," she said bluntly. "Staying here is suicide." Ethan didn't argue. He grabbed his backpack and shoved a flashlight, some food, and his few tools into it. Lyra watched him, then handed him a small metallic device. It was circular, smooth, and lighter than it looked. "What's this?" Ethan asked. "It's a signal jammer," Lyra explained. If we're spotted, press this button. It won't stop them, but it'll confuse their sensors for a few seconds. That might be enough to escape." Ethan nodded, slipping the device into his pocket. He wasn't sure if he trusted her, but right now, she seemed to be his only chance of surviving whatever was out there. They slipped out into the night, the rain still falling in cold sheets. The forest felt alive, every creak of the trees and rustle of the leaves amplified in the darkness. Lyra moved silently, her movements graceful and deliberate, while Ethan stumbled behind, struggling to keep up. After a few minutes, Lyra stopped abruptly and held up her hand. Ethan froze, his heart pounding. He followed her gaze and saw it, a faint red glow moving through the trees, bobbing like a firefly. But this wasn't any firefly. "They're sweeping the area," Lyra whispered. "Stay low." Ethan dropped to a crouch, gripping his rifle tightly. He watched as the glowing light grew closer, accompanied by the now familiar clicking sound. It was louder now, more distinct, like sharp nails tapping against metal. His breath caught as a shadowy figure emerged from the trees. It was taller than a man, its body sleek and covered in a metallic sheen that gleamed faintly in the rain. Its red eyes scanned the ground, moving in sharp, jerky motions. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. Lyra nudged him and pointed to the right. "We can circle around while it's distracted," she whispered. "But we have to move fast." Ethan nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. They crept through the underbrush, careful not to make a sound. But as they moved, Ethan's foot slipped on a wet rock, sending a small cascade of pebbles tumbling down a nearby slope. The creature froze. Its head snapped in their direction, and the clicking grew louder, faster. The red glow of its eyes locked onto them. "Run," Lyra hissed, grabbing Ethan's arm and pulling him to his feet. They bolted through the forest, the sound of the creature's pursuit close behind. Ethan's lungs burned as he sprinted, the rifle bouncing against his back. The red light grew brighter, and the clicking became deafening. Lyra suddenly stopped and turned, holding up the signal jammer. She pressed the button, and the device emitted a high-pitched whine. The creature faltered, its movements becoming erratic. "Go," she shouted, shoving Ethan forward. They didn't stop running until the sound of the clicking faded into the distance. When they finally collapsed against a large tree, gasping for breath, Ethan looked at Lyra. "Next time," he panted, "you're explaining everything before we run for our lives." Lyra managed a faint smile. "If there's a next time." Revelations begin. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Ethan and Lyra sat near a shallow stream, the water reflecting the pale light of dawn. They hadn't spoken much since escaping the red-eyed creature the night before. Ethan was still catching his breath, both physically and mentally. Lyra crouched by the water, rinsing her metallic scars. The light caught them in a way that made them shimmer, almost as if they were alive. Ethan couldn't help but stare. He had questions, too many, but didn't know where to start. Finally, he broke the silence. "You need to start talking. What's going on? What are you?" Lyra glanced over her shoulder, her silver eyes narrowing. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." Ethan crossed his arms, his expression firm. "Try me. I've already seen glowing red-eyed monsters and whatever it is you're carrying. My definition of believable has changed a lot in the past 24 hours. Lyra sighed and sat down on a rock near the stream. "Fine, but you asked for it." She hesitated for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. Then she began. "I'm not from here, not from Earth. My people, we're not like humans. We're faster, stronger, and far more advanced technologically. But that doesn't make us better." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You're saying you're an alien?" Lyra nodded. "I'm saying I'm an exile. I was once a huntress, a tracker trained to eliminate threats to my people, but I refused an order, a critical one. And for that, they turned on me." Ethan leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. "What kind of order?" Lyra's gaze hardened. They wanted me to kill innocents, an entire settlement of beings who posed no threat to us. It was supposed to send a message. But I couldn't do it. So I ran. The hunters chasing me now. Those biomechanical things. They're not just after me. They're after anyone who helps me. Ethan processed her words, his mind spinning. And you came here. To Earth. Why? I thought I could hide. Lyra admitted, her voice tinged with regret. Your planet is overlooked. Primitive, by our standards. I thought they wouldn't bother looking here. I was wrong. Ethan let out a dry laugh. Great. So you're saying we're basically a backwater hiding spot? More like a sanctuary, Lyra said softly. Humans may not have advanced technology, but you're resourceful, resilient. I thought maybe your kind would help me. Ethan shook his head, trying to wrap his mind around it all. And now those things are here, hunting you, and anyone who gets in the way. Lyra nodded. If you want to leave, I won't stop you. I've already dragged you into this mess, and I can't promise it'll end well. Ethan considered her words. Part of him wanted to walk away, to retreat to his cabin, and pretend none of this had ever happened. But another part of him, the part that couldn't ignore her fear, her desperation, kept him rooted in place. I'm not going anywhere, he said finally. Not yet, anyway. But if we're going to survive this, you need to be honest with me. No more half-truths. Lyra studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod. Fair enough. But if we stay here too long, they'll find us. As if on cue, Ethan's old portable radio, which he'd stuffed into his bag earlier, crackled to life. It emitted a strange, rhythmic pulse, a sound Ethan had never heard before. He pulled it out, frowning. What is that? He asked, holding it up. Lyra's expression darkened. A locator signal. It means they're nearby. Ethan's stomach sank. How close? Close enough, she said, standing abruptly. We need to move. Ethan stuffed the radio back into his bag and grabbed his rifle. Do you have a plan? Or are we just running again? Lyra hesitated, then pulled a small orb-like device from her jacket. It glowed faintly, its surface etched with alien symbols. There's a beacon not far from here, something I left behind when I first arrived. If I can reach it, I might be able to send a signal for help. Ethan eyed the device warily. Help? From who? Your people are the ones trying to kill you. Not all of them, Lyra said. There's a resistance, a small group that believes in protecting, not conquering. If I can reach them, they might be able to get me off this planet before it's too late. Ethan considered her words, then nodded. All right. Lead the way. They set off through the forest, the morning light filtering through the trees. But as they moved, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The radio's signal grew louder, the pulse more insistent. Every shadow seemed to shift, every sound amplified. Then, out of nowhere, the clicking returned. Ethan froze, his blood running cold. He turned to Lyra, who was already scanning the area with her glowing eyes. They're here, she whispered. Before Ethan could respond, a red glow appeared in the distance, followed by another. The hunters were closing in, faster this time. Lyra grabbed his arm. Run, and don't look back. But as they sprinted through the forest, Ethan couldn't help but glance over his shoulder. And what he saw made his heart stop. The hunters were no longer just machines. Their movements were eerily human, as if something alive had fused with the metal. And they weren't just chasing Lyra anymore. They were hunting him too. The alien hunt. Ethan's lungs burned as he sprinted through the dense forest, the heavy thud of his boots muffled by the damp soil. Behind him, the biomechanical hunters closed in, their glowing red eyes slicing through the darkness like twin lasers. The clicking sound they made, sharp and rhythmic, felt like a countdown to his doom. Lyra ran ahead of him, moving with an unnatural grace, her glowing silver eyes scanning the terrain for escape routes. Keep up, she shouted, her voice cutting through the pounding in Ethan's ears. "I'm trying." He yelled back, clutching the small signal jammer she had thrust into his hands earlier. "But I'm not a damn superhuman." Suddenly, Lyra stopped, raising her arm to halt him. They had reached a steep cliff, the rocky edge disappearing into a swirling mist below. The hunters' clicking grew louder behind them, echoing through the forest. "We're out of time," Ethan said, his voice panicked. "What now?" "Jump." Lyra didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pulled a small cylindrical device from her jacket and slanted into the ground. A faint blue energy shield shimmered to life, encircling them. "This will buy us a few seconds," she said, "but we need to fight." Ethan blinked at her, incredulous. "Fight? With what? I've got a rifle and 2 hands." Lyra smirked, the faintest hint of humor breaking through her tense expression. "Then use them wisely." She tossed him a sleek, alien-looking blade, its surface glowing with a soft, blue light. Ethan caught it awkwardly. "What the hell am I supposed to do with this?" "Don't let them kill you," Lyra said simply, drawing her own blade, a longer version of the one she'd given him. "Stay close to me." The energy shield flickered as the first hunter approached, its red eyes locking onto them. The creature stepped through the barrier as if it wasn't there, its metallic frame gleaming under the pale moonlight. Its movements were unnervingly fluid, like a predator stalking its prey. Lyra charged without hesitation, her blade slicing through the air with deadly precision. Sparks flew as she struck the hunter's armored body, her movements a blur of speed and agility. Ethan could only watch in awe and terror as she fought like someone who had done this 1,000 times before. "Ethan." Lyra's voice snapped him out of his trance. Another hunter was closing in, its clawed hand reaching for him. Without thinking, Ethan swung the alien blade, the glowing weapon humming as it sliced cleanly through the creature's arm. The hunter recoiled, emitting a shrill metallic screech. Ethan stared at the severed arm in disbelief. "Did I just?" "Focus," Lyra shouted, ducking under a hunter's swipe, and countering with a swift, brutal strike to its core. "They're not going to stop." The fight was chaos. Ethan swung wildly, his adrenaline surging as he managed to fend off another attacker. But for every hunter they'd brought down, it seemed like 2 more appeared from the shadows. The clicking sound was deafening now, a relentless reminder of their impossible odds. Lyra's blade flashed as she decapitated one of the hunters, its head tumbling to the ground with a metallic clang. She turned to Ethan, her expression grim. "We can't win this. Not here." "Then what's the plan?" Ethan asked, panting as he dodged another swipe. "We make a stand," Lyra said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Long enough for me to activate the beacon." "The beacon?" Ethan repeated, confused. "You mean the thing you said would call for help?" Lyra nodded, pulling a small orb-like device from her pocket. "It's close. Just keep them off me." Ethan didn't have time to argue. He stepped in front of Lyra, gripping the alien blade tightly as the hunters closed in. He swung and stabbed, his movements clumsy but effective enough to keep them at bay. Behind him, Lyra knelt on the ground, her hands working quickly to assemble the beacon. "Hurry up," Ethan shouted, narrowly dodging a clawed hand that came within inches of his face. "Almost there," Lyra said through gritted teeth. The beacon emitted a faint hum, its surface glowing with alien symbols. "Just a few more seconds." Ethan slashed at another hunter, his arms screaming in protest from the effort. He was outmatched, outnumbered, and running out of energy. But he refused to give up. Not yet. The beacon suddenly emitted a bright pulse of light, momentarily blinding the hunters. They staggered, their movements faltering as if the signal had disrupted their systems. "It's done," Lyra shouted, grabbing Ethan's arm. "We need to move. Now." They bolted toward the edge of the cliff, the beacon's light casting long shadows behind them. Ethan didn't have time to question what would happen next. He trusted Lyra, Or at least he trusted her enough to follow her into the unknown. "Jump!" Lyra yelled, pulling him forward. "What?" Ethan barely had time to protest before they leaped off the cliff together, disappearing into the swirling mist below. The last thing he saw was the hunters standing at the edge, their red eyes glowing like embers in the dark. As they plummeted, Lyra wrapped an arm around him, holding the beacon tightly in her other hand. "Trust me," she whispered, her voice almost drowned out by the wind. Ethan could only hope she was right. Trust and betrayal. The world came back into focus with a jolt. Ethan groaned, his body aching from the hard landing. He blinked, taking in his surroundings. A narrow ravine with jagged cliffs on either side. Mist swirled around them, and the faint hum of the activated beacon echoed in the distance. Where are we?" Ethan asked, struggling to sit up. Lyra stood a few feet away, scanning the area with her silver eyes. Her expression was tense, calculating. "Safe for now." The beacon scrambled their trackers. "They'll be disoriented, but not for long." Ethan ran a hand through his damp hair, trying to process everything. "You call this safe? We just jumped off a cliff." "It was the only way," Lyra replied coldly. "If you prefer the alternative, I can take you back." Ethan scowled, pulling himself to his feet. "You could have warned me first." Lyra didn't respond. Instead, she turned her attention to the beacon, which glowed faintly in her hand. She pressed a sequence of symbols on its surface, and the hum grew louder. "This will broadcast a signal strong enough to reach the resistance," she explained. "If they're listening, they'll come." "And if they're not?" Ethan asked, folding his arms. Lyra didn't answer. Her silence was more unsettling than any of the threats they'd faced so far. Ethan sighed, his frustration boiling over. "Look, I've been dragged into this mess, almost killed multiple times, and now I'm hiding in a ravine with an alien fugitive. I think I deserve some answers." Lyra's gaze shifted to him, her eyes narrowing. "I've told you what you need to know." "No, you've told me what you want me to know," Ethan shot back. "There's a difference." For a moment, they stared at each other, the tension thick in the air. Finally, Lyra let out a heavy sigh. "Fine. You want the truth. Here it is. That beacon isn't just a signal for help. It's a data relay. It's carrying encrypted information that could destroy the hunters and the entire system they serve." Ethan frowned. "You're saying you've been running around with the equivalent of a nuclear code in your pocket?" "It's not just a code," Lyra said. "It's evidence. Proof of the atrocities my people have committed, hidden from the rest of the galaxy. If the Resistance gets their hands on it, they can expose everything." Ethan shook his head, disbelief etched on his face. "So, you're not just some runaway. You're a whistleblower. And those things chasing us, they're not just trying to kill you, they're trying to erase you." Lyra nodded. "Now you understand." Ethan ran a hand over his face, trying to process the weight of her words. "And what happens to Earth if this resistance doesn't come through? Are we just collateral damage in your war?" Lyra hesitated, her expression softening. "That's why I chose this planet. It's isolated, out of the way. If everything goes wrong, I'll make sure they don't come here." Ethan wanted to believe her, but something in her tone didn't sit right. "And what happens if the Resistance decides Earth isn't out of the way anymore?" Lyra didn't respond. She turned back to the beacon, avoiding his gaze. Ethan's suspicion grew. He walked over to her, his voice low and firm. "What aren't you telling me, Lyra?" She hesitated, her fingers tightening around the beacon. "The Resistance. They're not exactly saints. They'll use the data for their own gain. But they're the only chance I have." Ethan's jaw clenched. "So you're gambling with my planet, my life." "I didn't have a choice." Lyra snapped, her voice rising. "Do you think I wanted any of this? Do you think I enjoy dragging you into it?" Ethan stepped back, anger flaring in his chest. "Maybe you didn't have a choice before, but you do now. You could destroy that beacon, stop this whole mess from spiraling out of control. Lyra shook her head. You don't understand. If I destroy this, it's over. The hunters will find me, and they'll kill me. And then they'll keep going. They won't stop until they've wiped out anything, or anyone, that gets in their way. Ethan stared at her, his mind racing. He wanted to believe she was doing the right thing, that her intentions were noble. But the more he listened, the more he realized how dangerous her gamble was. Before he could say anything, the faint clicking sound returned, echoing through the ravine. Lyra's head snapped up, her body tensing. They've found us, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan reached for his rifle, his heart pounding. So what now? Run? Fight? Or do you have another cliff we can jump off? Lyra didn't answer. Instead, she activated the beacon, its glow intensifying. We hold them off until the signal is fully transmitted. After that, we'll figure it out. Ethan grimaced, gripping his weapon tightly. You better hope this resistance of yours is worth it. Lyra glanced at him, her expression unreadable. So do I. The final stand. The air crackled with an otherworldly hum as the beacon's light grew brighter, casting long, shifting shadows across the jagged rocks of the ravine. Ethan tightened his grip on the alien blade Lyra had given him, his palms slick with sweat. The clicking sound echoed closer, a rhythmic, mechanical pulse that felt like a predator's heartbeat. They're here, Lyra said, her voice steady but low. She stood at the center of the beacon's glowing field, her silver eyes scanning the ravine's edge. We have minutes, maybe less. Ethan glanced at the beacon. You said this thing is transmitting. How much longer until it's done? Too long, she replied, her tone grim. They'll overwhelm us before then. Ethan let out a frustrated breath. Great. So what's the plan? Hope they trip over their own feet. Lyra smirked faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. We hold them here. Buy time. If the signal goes through, the resistance will come. And if it doesn't? Ethan asked, his voice edged with fear. Lyra didn't answer. She didn't need to. The silence was enough. Before Ethan could press further, the first hunter appeared, its sleek, metallic body gleaming in the beacon's light. Its glowing red eyes locked onto Lyra, and it emitted a piercing screech, like grinding metal. Behind it, more hunters emerged from the shadows, their movements precise and unnervingly fluid. Ethan's heart pounded as the clicking grew louder, the hunters advancing like an unstoppable tide. We're supposed to hold off that, he said, his voice rising. Just keep them away from the beacon, Lyra said sharply, drawing her glowing blade. I'll take care of the rest. Ethan didn't have time to argue. The first hunter lunged, its clawed hand slicing through the air. He dodged, swinging his blade instinctively. The weapon hummed as it connected with the hunter's arm, severing it in a spray of sparks. Okay, Ethan muttered, his pulse racing. That's something. Lyra was a blur of motion, her combat skills honed to lethal precision. She danced between the hunters, her blade striking with unerring accuracy. Sparks flew as she dismantled one after another, but for every hunter she cut down, two more emerged from the shadows. They're not stopping, Ethan yelled, blocking an attack from another hunter. Its strength was overwhelming, and he barely managed to shove it back. They won't, Lyra replied, her voice strained. They're designed for this. Ethan's mind raced. His engineering instincts kicked in as he scanned the ravine for anything they could use. His eyes landed on a cluster of loose boulders perched precariously above the beacon. Lyra, if we bring those rocks down, it'll block the ravine. Buy us more time. She followed his gaze, nodding quickly. Do it. I'll cover you. Ethan scrambled up the rocks, his hands slipping on the damp surface. Below, Lyra fought with feral intensity, her blade cutting through the hunters like a glowing arc of death. Ethan reached the top and began working frantically, using his tools to pry a large boulder loose. Almost there. he shouted, his muscles straining. The hunters seemed to realize what he was doing. Several broke off from attacking Lyra and began climbing toward him. His heart sank as he saw the red-eyed machines closing the gap. "Ethan, move!" Lyra yelled, dispatching another hunter and charging after the ones climbing toward him. With one final push, Ethan dislodged the boulder. It tumbled down, crashing into the ravine with a deafening roar. The resulting landslide blocked the path, cutting off the hunters at the far end. Dust and debris filled the air, but the immediate threat was neutralized. Ethan slid back down, coughing as he hit the ground. "That won't hold them for long." "It doesn't need to," Lyra said, wiping sweat from her brow. "The beacon is almost done." The glow from the device intensified, casting an eerie light that painted the ravine in shifting shadows. But the reprieve was short-lived. The remaining hunters, undeterred, advanced with renewed fury. Their clicking turned into a deafening cacophony, like a swarm closing in. Ethan and Lyra stood shoulder to shoulder, the beacon humming behind them. "This is it," Ethan said, gripping his blade tightly. "One last stand." Lyra glanced at him, her expression softening for a moment. "You've done more than I expected, Ethan. Thank you." "Save the speeches," he replied, his voice shaking. "We're not dead yet." The first hunter lunged, and the battle began anew. Ethan fought with everything he had, his swings becoming more desperate as exhaustion set in. Lyra moved like a whirlwind, but even she was beginning to falter under the relentless assault. Suddenly, the beacon emitted a piercing tone, followed by a pulse of light so bright it forced Ethan to shield his eyes. The hunters froze mid-attack, their movements jerky and erratic as if the signal had disrupted their systems. Lyra's eyes widened. The signal. Before she could finish, a deafening roar filled the sky. Ethan looked up and saw it. A massive ship descending through the clouds, its sleek alien design unlike anything he'd ever seen. The beacon had worked, but Ethan's relief was short-lived. Lyra's expression darkened as the ship's lights illuminated the ravine. "That's not the Resistance," she whispered. Ethan's stomach dropped. "Then who is it?" Lyra's grip on her blade tightened. "The ones who want me dead." The true nature revealed. The alien ship loomed above the ravine like a predator circling its prey. Its massive hull reflected the pale light of the beacon, casting long, shifting shadows across the rocky terrain. Ethan's heart pounded as the low hum of the ship's engines vibrated through the air, drowning out even the eerie clicking of the remaining hunters. "That's not help, is it?" Ethan asked, gripping his alien blade tightly. Lyra's silver eyes were locked on the ship, her jaw clenched. "No, that's a kill squad." Ethan swore under his breath. "So what now?" "Fight them too. Because I don't think we're walking away from this one." Lyra didn't respond. Instead, she stepped forward, standing between Ethan and the descending ship. Her posture was rigid, her hand gripping her glowing blade like it was her last lifeline. "This isn't your fight anymore, Ethan. Get out of here. Get out of here." Ethan snapped. "Where am I supposed to go? And what makes you think I'm leaving you to face that alone?" Lyra turned to him, her expression softening. "Because I can survive this. You can't. And if I fail, someone has to live to warn your people." Ethan shook his head, his frustration boiling over. "Stop pretending you're invincible. I've seen you bleed, Lyra. If you go out there alone, you'll die." Before Lyra could respond, the ship's engines roared, and a beam of light shot down from its underbelly. 3 figures materialized within it, stepping onto the rocky ground with unnerving precision. They were humanoid but taller, their bodies encased in sleek, metallic armor that shimmered with an iridescent glow. Their eyes glowed a deep crimson, and each carried weapons that pulsed with deadly energy. The leader stepped forward, its voice cold and mechanical. "Lyra 7, you are charged with treason against the sovereignty. Surrender the beacon and submit to judgment." Lyra tightened her grip on her blade but didn't move. "Judgment? You mean execution." Let's not pretend this is anything else." The leader tilted its head slightly, as if amused. "You've caused enough trouble, Lyra, but it ends here." Ethan stepped up beside her, his blade trembling in his hand. "If you think you're taking her without a fight, you're in for a surprise." The leader's gaze shifted to him, its expression unreadable. A human. How quaint. Lyra shot Ethan a sharp look. "What are you doing?" "Backing you up," he said simply. "You're not the only stubborn one here." Before she could argue, the leader raised its hand, and the other two figures sprang into action. They moved with terrifying speed, their weapons cutting through the air like bolts of lightning. Ethan barely managed to block a strike, the force sending him stumbling backward. Lyra met the second attacker head-on, her blade flashing as she parried and countered with the precision of a warrior who had trained for this her entire life. Sparks flew as their weapons clashed, the sound deafening in the confined ravine. Ethan, meanwhile, fought desperately, his movements clumsy compared to his opponent's calculated strikes. He swung wildly, managing to graze the attacker's armor. The figure faltered for a moment, giving him just enough time to lunge forward and drive his blade into its chest. The armor cracked, and the figure collapsed in a heap of sparks and smoke. "Not bad for a quaint human," Ethan muttered, panting. Lyra, now locked in a fierce duel with the leader, shouted over her shoulder. "Focus, Ethan. The fight isn't over." The leader was relentless, its strikes precise and brutal. Lyra was fast, but even she struggled to keep up with its relentless assault. She managed to disarm it momentarily, but it recovered with inhuman speed, grabbing her by the throat and lifting her off the ground. Ethan didn't think, he just acted. He charged forward, his blade raised, and drove it into the leader's side. The alien screeched, releasing Lyra, and staggering back. She landed on her feet, gasping for air, and finished it off with a swift, decisive strike to its core. The last attacker, seeing its leader fall, hesitated. Lyra seized the moment, striking it down with a single devastating blow. Silence fell over the ravine, broken only by the faint hum of the beacon and the crackling remains of their enemies. Ethan dropped his blade, his body trembling with exhaustion. Lyra knelt by the beacon, her hands moving over its surface. The light dimmed, and the humming stopped. She looked up at Ethan, her expression unreadable. "It's done." Ethan frowned. "What's done?" "The signal." Lyra nodded. "The resistance will come. They'll take the beacon and expose the sovereignty. But it's not over yet." "What do you mean?" Ethan asked warily. She stood, stepping closer to him. "The resistance might not see Earth the way I do. To them, it's just another chess piece in a much larger game. If they think your planet is valuable, they won't leave it alone." Ethan stared at her, realization dawning. "You knew this all along." Lyra looked away. "I didn't have a choice. The sovereignty needed to be stopped, no matter the cost." Ethan's anger flared. "And what about us? My planet, my people? Are we just another cost to you?" "No," she said firmly, meeting his gaze. "That's why I stayed. I'll make sure Earth doesn't become another battlefield. I owe you that much." Ethan wanted to yell, to tell her she had no right to make that decision for him, for humanity. But the exhaustion in her eyes stopped him. She wasn't the villain here, just a survivor trying to fix a broken system. As the faint hum of distant engines filled the air, Lyra turned toward the horizon. "They're coming. You need to leave." Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "And you?" Lyra smirked faintly. "I'll be where I need to be." With that, she disappeared into the shadows, leaving Ethan alone with the weight of what had just unfolded. The resistance would come, and so would the questions. But for now, he had survived. And in Lyra's absence, one truth lingered. The galaxy was far more dangerous and far more fragile than he had ever imagined.